Hi, everybody. This is Warren Herman, and I want to share something that you can use to deal with religious scrupulosity. See, scrupulosity involves getting caught on whether we have sinned or not. And for those of you who experience scrupulosity, you could be familiar with this cycle of you kind of are involved in some type of situation. You're trying not to sin, or you're going along, and then you wonder, maybe I did sin, or maybe I didn't. Oh no. So there's these different phases where you essentially worry about some type of action you take, and then you kind of ruminate about whether you sinned. Now, the whole thing is that for someone who's scrupulous, usually you're very focused on trying to avoid sin. So it's unlikely that you're living a horrible life and doing bonkers things. So the thing is, you want to apply these steps so that you can find some freedom. And so I think the steps that we want to understand first is we want to understand the criteria for a mortal sin. We want, when we're having, when we're doing some type of action that's a mortal sin, we have to have sufficient reflection or full knowledge. Full knowledge and sufficient reflection. We have to have full consent of the will, and we have to have, it has to be something that is a sin. It has to be grave matter, or at least we have to, the outer limit, we have to at least think it's grave matter. So the other thing is that we can't be impaired in some way. Like we can't be asleep. We can't be completely on a medication that's making us incapacitated or really confused. We can't have dementia. These type of things, as far as I understand it, give us the ability to not have a mortal sin, even if you have the other criteria. So essentially there's three, and with this understanding of impairment, we have the four criteria essentially for mortal sin. Three are the official. So let's think about this. So how do you stop being scared? You stop being scared by seeing that something is not dangerous. If somebody gets a medical diagnosis, they say, okay, you have a terrible disease, and then you go to the doctor and they examine you and they say, okay, a few weeks later, they say, all right, actually, you don't have that disease. You're going to feel a lot better. So the thing is, you want to do the same thing to your mind. But the problem is, when we're in a scrupulous state, our mind is not really receptive to reasoning because we are so scared. We have such a fearful mindset. We are not really clear on what's going on. So we're not going to win by fighting with our thoughts. So the main thing we want to do is we want to get around this. And there's a really interesting metaphor that I think can help you in doing this as we fight with our thoughts. So here's the deal. There's a story about a butcher who his knife was never getting dull. And so people wanted to ask, how is it that you always keep your knife sharp? And his answer was to aim for the space in the animal, not for the parts that are tough and, the bones and the things. He's aiming between those things, and his blade stayed sharp. And in a similar way, we want to have that kind of strategic intervention with this type of thinking. We don't want to directly take head on these thoughts of, have I sinned, have I not? Let me review this. We can't make it, I'm going to stop thinking about it. I'm just going to stop thinking about it. It doesn't work. That's like the butcher trying to chop through the bone. It's not going to work. So what we want to do is we want to use a principle where we're not going to be able to convince our mind that we don't have, if we were using that metaphor before of the disease, we're not going to be able to say, okay, I haven't sinned. You're not going to be able to fight your way into it. So what you want to do is you want to use, rather than reasoning with your mind, you need to start to notice the ways that you doubt that you've sinned. So start to notice the ways that there's ambiguity about whether you had sufficient reflection. Ambiguity about whether there was grave matter. Ambiguity about whether there is any of these criteria for mortal sin. Ambiguity about whether there was impairment. Notice the ways, don't try to convince yourself of the ways that you were impaired. Don't try to tell yourself about these things. Notice the uncertainty. Because when you notice the uncertainty, another principle comes into play, which is popularly called, by confessors, it is popularly called, when in doubt, it doesn't count. When you have a doubt about whether you committed a mortal sin, you may proceed as if you have not. You don't need to think about that anymore. It doesn't count as a mortal sin because you have doubts about it. You don't have to act as if you had mortal sin. This principle, in dubitas libertas, is I think the way that you would say it in Latin, is also used in moral theology, where they say like an uncertain, if you're uncertain about whether you need to do something, and obviously within reason, have a formed conscience. And this is I'm just passing along things I've read. Obey your confessors, obey the teachings of the church. Don't do something dopey. But if you have a formed conscience and you're like, okay, when in doubt, you just say, okay, proceed as if there is no sin, and form that judgment. And so the thing is, remember, like you can really get out of a lot of problems if you use this principle in when in doubt, liberty. And the thing is that it's very effective because you can kind of fight against this kind of tendency toward rumination by just noticing the ways you doubt. So the doubt which currently is leading to a lot of confusion in your life about whether you've sinned or not, can actually become the very thing that leads you to freedom. And so the thing is, this is, I believe, a very effective way, because you're not trying to end the rumination. You're just noticing the ways. But as your mind is ruminating about it, or just as you're thinking about the situation, just notice the ways. Okay, did I really have sufficient reflection before I did that action? Oh, is there some doubt about that? Oh, did I really fully consent to that? Did I really just give it my full consent to my will, not just had a feeling about it? Did I really have that full consent? Or was it just, I was afraid and it kind of the fear amplified the thought, and the thought jumped into my mind as my appetites moved at it, and it just kind of felt like I was consenting to it. Is that what happened? Or did I really say, I want this, with my will? Or is it grave matter? Like, maybe it's not even something that's a sin. Like, is it sure that that's a sin, or that I even thought it was a sin at the time? Do I have any doubts about that? Maybe I was impaired. Was I half asleep? Was I like pretty asleep? Was I on a medication that was really impairing me, or something like that? Was I such strong emotions, or such a strange reaction of some kind, because strong emotion in some ways, or duress, like someone had a gun to my head, these are other things that can be mitigating factors. So, there can be these type of things, severe anxiety can be, or these type of things. And even I would say sometimes, I think, you probably could also say that sometimes scrupulosity itself could be a type of severe anxiety. They're not thinking clearly. So notice the ways in which you have doubt. That's the only way that you're going to be like that butcher, chop at those weak points, and kind of see through that illusion that you have sinned. And so, or at least that you've sinned gravely. You may have sinned, but maybe not mortally. So that's something that I think can be helpful. And I hope this helps in your journey to find freedom in Christ.